Night falls like a tide without a sound, slipping over the land with that cold finality only the Outback really understands. And out beyond the reach of fences and firelight, the world begins to hush. The wind eases, the trees stiffen, even the stars blink slower, as though bracing for something. You can feel it if you sit still, the quiet pressing in, thick and ancient, like the breath of something waiting just offshore. Let the noise of your day dissolve, mate. Let your shoulders drop, the weight of waking hours sink into the dust. Breathe in slow and let your mind drift, like smoke, like mist over black water. There's a place I want to take you, a place between lands, between reckonings, between here and whatever lies beyond. We're heading south, far south, past the last line of gum trees, past the cattle gates and red dirt roads that lose their name. Down where the mainland crumbles into sea and the heart-shaped silhouette of Tasmania rises from the horizon like a promise or a threat. That stretch between, it's called the Bass Strait, a body of water that's seen more than it's told. On a good day, the strait is a postcard, sharp blue skies, islands like knuckles punching out of the sea, a shimmer that tricks the eye into thinking the world is gentle, but that's just its smile. When the weather turns, and it does often suddenly, the Bass Strait shows another face, and it doesn't blink. There are mariners who won't speak its name, fishermen who pause just long enough when asked, eyes drifting to the floor as if measuring the weight of ghosts in their silence. The strait is a place of beautiful violence, waves that rise like walls, winds that tear at the rigging, and depths that hold onto their dead like secrets. They call it Australia's Bermuda Triangle, and not without cause, for in these waters things disappear, whole ships swallowed without a scream, pilots whose voices flicker over radios, then vanish into static. No wreckage, no bodies, just silence. The kind of silence that echoes louder than any shout. So close your eyes now, or let them fall heavy if they haven't already. We're about to drift into those waters together. Let the cold wind brush your cheek. Hear the creak of timber in the dark and the hush of the sea licking at the rocks. We're listening now to the confessions of the Bass Strait. Long before radar and satellites, the strait was known by those who dared cross it. Shallow, they called it, which only made it worse. Shallow water means less room for waves to move, which means they break harder. When the roaring 40s roll up from Antarctica, screaming across the latitudes with teeth of ice and fists of air, the strait becomes a cauldron, a place where no one stays dry or safe. Back in the early days of European exploration, it was a gamble, but a necessary one. Ships had to make the crossing from Sydney down to Hobart or to trade outposts further south. Some made it, many didn't. They say there are over 1,000 wrecks resting beneath that stretch of sea. Some named, most forgotten, all part of the strait's appetite. The Katareki was one of the first. 1845, a migrant ship from England, packed with over 400 souls. She hit the reefs off King Island during a howling storm just before dawn. No time to signal, no chance to flee. The waves pounded her into splinters. Barely a dozen survived. The rest were taken. It remains Australia's worst civil maritime disaster, a monument invisible and cold to the fury of this place. And yet, there are wrecks that go deeper than tragedy, ones that don't leave behind even sorrow, just question marks. Take the SS Nemesis, July 1904. She left Newcastle with a load of coal, bound for Melbourne. No alarms, no strange weather expected. But somewhere out there, the sea turned and took her. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing. Until bodies began to wash ashore miles apart. Some cargo too, but no ship. For over 100 years, the Nemesis was a ghost. Then in 2024, just last year, explorers found her, deep, far off course, almost intact, resting in stillness, like she'd fallen asleep mid-scream. What happened? Maybe it was the storm, maybe not. But the time she spent missing only fed the legend, made the strait feel sentient, selective, and the nemesis was just one. There've been others. Smaller boats, private yachts, fishing trawlers that left port in calm weather and never arrived. No radio calls, no debris, just silence. You hear these stories, and you wonder, is it just bad luck? A cruel convergence of currents and wind? Or is there something else? Something that bends time out there, or twists reality just enough to make people disappear? The ocean doesn't answer. It never has. There's a rhythm to the sea, not the one you hear in lullabies or holiday postcards, but the deep one, the one that moves beneath the surface, slow and knowing. That rhythm doesn't always match our clocks. It swallows things when it pleases. Sometimes it gives them back, sometimes not. The Bass Strait knows that rhythm better than most. And maybe that's why some stories don't end the way we expect. Maybe that's why there are people who climb aboard small boats, point their bows south, and are never seen again. Like they passed into a different tide, one that doesn't return. But it's not just ships. The Bass Strait, it seems, has an appetite for sky as well. It doesn't just reach upward, it pulls. One case in particular has hung over the strait like low cloud since the spring of 1978. It's the kind of mystery that sinks deeper the more you look at it. Not because it's complicated, but because it's clean, too clean. Frederick Valentich was 20 years old, still green behind the ears but keen, passionate about flying, and logged more hours in the cockpit than most his age. He wanted to join the Royal Australian Air Force but didn't make the cut. Still, he flew when he could, practiced, learned the skies like most young blokes learn the road. On the evening of 21st October, he rented a single-engine Cessna and took off from Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne. His plan was simple, a routine training flight to King Island, calm skies, good visibility, a straight line over the strait. But about 40 minutes in, something happened. At 7:06 p.m., he radioed Melbourne flight service. His tone was clipped, but not panicked. He said there was an unidentified aircraft following him, just above and behind. He could see 4 green lights, no wings, no sound, just there, trailing him, like a shadow that didn't obey the sun. Melbourne responded, no known traffic in his area. No radar hits, no flight plans filed, nothing out there officially. Valentich's voice shifted then. Not fear, exactly. More unease, confusion. He repeated that the object was circling him, hovering, that his engine was beginning to splutter. Then a pause, one that felt longer than it was. He added, "It is not an aircraft." That's when the static began, faint at first, then thicker, but between the bursts you could hear him, asking, describing, trying to stay composed. He spoke of metallic reflections, of strange motions, of a sensation like being watched from inside the air itself. Then came the final transmission. A few scattered words, barely audible. Then a sound, 17 seconds long, harsh, grating, like metal being dragged across metal, or something alive and angry being pulled apart. And after that, nothing. No more signal, no more aircraft, no Valentich. Search planes were scrambled. The strait was combed for days. Ships, helicopters, divers. Not a single scrap of wreckage was found. No oil slick, no fuselage, no body. Just sky and sea and questions. The public went wild. Theories bloomed like bushfire. Some said he faked his death, crashed on purpose, vanished to start a new life. Others said he got disoriented, flew upside down, saw his own plane's lights in the water and panicked. But none of those theories sit quite right. Pilots who've reviewed the case say Valentich was too experienced to make such a rookie mistake. And even if he did, where's the wreck? The Bass Strait might be cruel, but it rarely swallows everything. Then there's the sound. that scraping noise. Scientists tried to explain it: interference, mechanical failure, feedback. But none of the explanations matched the signature exactly, and the mystery has only deepened with time. To this day, the Valentich incident remains one of Australia's most compelling aviation enigmas. A disappearance not just of man and machine, but of certainty. It left a hole in the narrative, a breath held too long. People who were on King Island that night reported seeing strange lights in the sky, moving erratically, vanishing and reappearing. No aircraft were ever confirmed in the area, no meteorological balloons, no flares, no search and rescue drills. And here's the thing about stories like this: they change the air around a place. The Bass Strait was already feared, but after Valentich it became aware. A place you think twice about crossing. A place where the sky looks back. You talk to old pilots who've flown over it and they'll tell you there's a moment just before you hit the midpoint when the horizon looks a little wrong. The clouds hang a bit lower, the light shifts, your instruments whisper doubts. It passes usually, but not always. Maybe it's tricks of the atmosphere, maybe it's nerves, or maybe, just maybe, there's something there. Watching, waiting, choosing. Valentich's father believed his son had been taken, not by sea or mistake, but by something else. He never stopped hoping he might come back, and even now, more than 40 years on, some believe he just might. There's a strange sort of gravity to unsolved stories. They pull at the edges of your thoughts when you're alone. They don't beg to be believed. They just linger, like something left behind on a still night. Frederick Valentich's final words float in that space, suspended like his last position on a flight map that leads nowhere. You can hear them if you sit quiet long enough, not as sound, but as atmosphere, a weight in the air, a subtle detour in your thinking, because the real terror isn't in the unknown itself. It's in how familiar it can feel. The Bass Strait has become more than a maritime zone. It's become a canvas for the unexplained. Each account, each disappearance, sighting, or inexplicable sound paints another layer over the waves. And like any myth that grows from the truth, the more you try to understand it, the more it seems to slip through your fingers. But Valentich wasn't the first to report strange phenomena over the strait, and he wouldn't be the last. Local fishermen have whispered of lights beneath the surface, moving fast, far too fast for any known vessel. Stories go back to the 1920s, sometimes further. Bright spheres dancing along the horizon, machines that leave no wake. Echoes that bounce back from radar, then vanish. King Island itself carries stories, not loud, not shouted, just told softly among those who've stayed long enough to respect the rhythms of isolation. Farmers who've seen shadows move across fields when no clouds pass. Campers who wake to find their fires cold, though the wood's untouched. And radios that speak when they shouldn't. Static that pulses like a heartbeat. Words buried in the noise. There's a theory, not often spoken in academic circles but whispered among airmen and sailors, that the Bass Strait sits on a fault in the world. Not a tectonic one, a thinner patch, a membrane, a place where what we call normal brushes up against something else, and sometimes it tears. Skeptics scoff, of course. They have their data, their graphs, their conditions and probabilities. But ask them to sail the strait alone, at night, with no moon and no signal. See how confident they sound then. You begin to understand after a while that the strait isn't cruel, it's not malevolent, it's just untamed, like the desert, like the sky before satellite trails. It's a place that doesn't care what stories you bring into it. It will take them, and you, and hold them with the same indifference it gives to the wind. There's something deeply human about our need to explain everything. We chase answers like dogs after a scent, convinced that if we dig deep enough we'll find bones. But the Bass Strait doesn't yield that way. It doesn't fit neatly in categories. You can mark its depths and track its storms, But its soul, if it has one, moves outside those lines. And so the mystery endures. The sea still rolls over the bones of the Cataraqui, the Nemesis, and others without names. Pilots still cross those skies with a quiet prayer tucked in the back of their minds. And sometimes they hear something strange in their headsets. A crackle, a whisper, a voice that doesn't belong. Some say they've felt the air change mid-flight, a coldness that sweeps the cockpit for no reason. A sudden drop in instruments that corrects itself just as fast. The wind picking up when the forecast promised stillness. And it's not just commercial flights. The military too has had its share of odd encounters over the strait. But those stories, they don't make it to the public, at least not in official terms. You have to know someone, or hear it in a pub from an old RAF bloke who's had just enough whiskey to forget what he's not supposed to remember. The files, if they exist, remain sealed or redacted. Training anomalies, they might say. Instrument error. But even the most straight-laced pilots have a look in their eyes when you ask. A flicker, like they've seen something they'd rather not name. Because that's the other thing about mystery. Once you've touched it, it doesn't let you go clean. It stays in the lines of your hands, in the way your voice softens when telling the story. You don't need to believe in aliens or portals or time loops to feel the weight of the Bass Strait silence. You just need to look at the pattern, the disappearances, the lack of debris, the last words that trail off into nowhere, and sit with that discomfort. Because some places were never meant to be solved, only respected. They say the strait has moods. You can read them if you know how. The color of the water, the tilt of the wind, the way the horizon trembles just a little more than it should. Locals read those signs the way you might read someone's face before a storm of words. And just like with people, it's not always what the strait does that tells you something. It's what it doesn't. Silence can be louder than any scream, and out on those waters, silence comes often and thick. You'll hear of nights where the sea goes glass flat and the wind holds its breath. No birds, no breakers, just an eerie, perfect stillness. That kind of quiet makes your skin crawl, like the world's holding a secret just behind its teeth. Those are the nights where things go missing. There are stories that never made the news, too small, too scattered, or too strange to warrant a headline. A two-man fishing crew that never returned. An amateur pilot doing a joyride loop to Flinders Island who vanished from radar and turned up days later on a beach, barefoot, dehydrated, and with no memory of what happened. Just a single word scrawled in the sand near where he was found, again. Then there was the yacht Mistral back in 2008. Good weather experienced crew. It set out from Port Welshpool bound for Devonport. Regular trip, reliable boat, no issues with equipment. Midway through the crossing, the radio cut off. No distress call, nothing. The GPS signal stuttered for a few seconds, then went dead. They found the Mistral adrift 3 days later, sails torn, engine intact but dead cold, food still laid out in the cabin untouched, a cup of coffee half drunk, no sign of the crew, no marks of struggle, just absence. Investigations came and went. The official report chalked it up to environmental misadventure. Uday, but the fishermen who helped in the search, they tell it differently. They talk about the way the birds turned back before they reached the last known coordinates. How their own compasses spun for 5 minutes straight. How the radio crackled with static, then played a song no one could identify. Something that sounded like a waltz, but moved too slow, too wrong. Even now, when they speak of that patch of water, they don't say its name. Just a glance out to sea and a shake of the head. And that's what the Bass Strait does. It collects. It doesn't just gather wreckage and whispers. It gathers fear. A slow, steady accumulation. Not dramatic, but relentless. Like sand building in a boot until you feel the blister. Some people are drawn to it. They call themselves truth seekers, theorists, investigators, documentarians. They come with cameras and notes and confidence. But few stay long. The longer you listen to the Strait, the less sure you are of what you know. There was one fellow, Dr. Marcus Ellery, who made it his life's work, former physicist turned anomaly researcher, brilliant mind, sharp eyes. He published a paper in 2012 suggesting that the Bass Strait sits at the convergence of several unique magnetic anomalies, spots where geomagnetic fields twist and spike. He linked it to instrument failure, hallucinations, even time distortion. The paper was ridiculed by the scientific community. But then he vanished too. Last seen boarding a private charter out of Launceston, headed for a dive site he wouldn't disclose. He never came back. His boat washed ashore empty, with his notes scattered and soaked. Most were ruined. The ones that remained spoke in circles, fragments, diagrams that didn't connect. One line, however, was underlined twice in red. Not a place, a threshold. And that's the kind of language that makes you pause. Because whether you believe in science or spirits, machines or myths, that idea touches something primal, that the Bass Strait isn't just a zone of bad weather or bad luck, but a border. Between what and what, though? That's the question no one's answered. You start thinking in different terms when you sit with these stories long enough. Not just about ships and planes, but about memory, about time, about the way a place can hold not just your body, but your echo. Like it remembers you long after you're gone. You wonder if the voices of those lost, Valentich, the crew of the Nemesis, the families waiting on distant docks, are still out there. Not ghosts, not spirits, but frequencies, caught in the currents, waiting for the right receiver, and you wonder what might happen if you listened hard enough, if, in the still of night, you tuned your ear just right and heard something, a whisper, a warning, a name. There's something ancient in the bones of this land, and in its waters too, a silence that predates our maps, our markers, our brave little boats. The Bass Strait didn't become mysterious when ships started vanishing. It was always that way. We just began noticing once we gave it a name. Before the explorers came, before lighthouses blinked warnings into the night, the Aboriginal peoples knew this place. They spoke of spirits in the sea, creatures that moved with the tides and could swallow a man without a sound. Not monsters, not demons, just forces, a presence. Something that watched and waited. There are Dreamtime stories from Tasmania and the southeastern coast of the mainland that speak of a land bridge that once connected them. Walkable, they say, a crossing of stone and earth that let people move from one world to another. Then, one day, the sea rose, not slowly, but all at once. The land was swallowed, the connection severed, and those left behind whispered that the spirits beneath had taken it back. Now, science will tell you that land bridge was real, part of the ancient supercontinent, submerged after the last ice age. But science doesn't tell you how people felt as they watched it vanish. It doesn't speak of the silence that followed, or the shapes seen moving under the new sea. Some say the Bass Strait is not just a remnant of that bridge, but its wound. And wounds can fester. Modern sailors don't speak of spirits. They speak of drift, of current, of pressure systems. But you watch them. Watch the way they check their equipment twice before entering the strait. The way they glance at the sky more than they should. There's a reverence there, an unspoken pact. You enter the strait prepared. You do not mock it. You do not tempt it. Those who do, well, their names end up in stories like this. There was a young couple, tourists, naive maybe, or just curious, who rented a small motorboat from the mainland. The weather was holding. Their route was modest, hugging the coast, nothing bold. But they decided, on impulse, to veer out toward the center of the strait, chasing the promise of open water. Once in a lifetime, they said, according to the rental logs. Might as well see what's out there. Their last message was a photo, uploaded to social media. The girl smiling, wind in her hair, the sea stretching empty and perfect behind her. The caption, "Nothing but blue ahead." They were never seen again. No wreck, no signal, not even a trace of fuel slick. The search turned up one life jacket, still zipped dry, as if it hadn't been in the water at all. Their families don't speak to the press anymore. But once, in an interview, the girl's mother said something that stuck. She said, "It's not the not knowing that's worst. It's that I still wake up thinking she's out there, just one wave beyond reach." And maybe she is. Maybe all of them are. Valentich, the Nemesis crew, the Mistral sailors. Not dead, not lost, just removed. Set adrift somewhere beyond the curtain of what we call real. You start to notice how often clocks go wrong in these stories. Watches stopping, GPS units freezing, radios jumping frequencies, like time itself stumbles out there. Like the rules bend, just slightly, just enough. There's a pattern if you look sideways at it. Disappearances often happen at dusk, or in the hour before dawn, in those in-between times. The liminal hours, they're called. Moments when light and dark wrestle, and neither quite wins. When shadows grow without reason, and the horizon forgets its line. Maybe the strait doesn't open always. Maybe it waits for those slivers of uncertainty, when the sun is not here nor gone, to reach through the skin of the world and take. And what it takes, it keeps quiet. You spend enough time around the Bass Strait, and you stop thinking in terms of facts. You start thinking in terms of feelings, the weight in the air, the itch behind the eyes, that sensation you're being watched from a place without windows. No matter how calm the sea, there's always a hush beneath it. As though the water knows what you don't, and isn't inclined to share. In 1996, there was an incident the authorities tried to wrap up with paperwork. But those who were there still talk about it in half sentences. A Coast Watch plane was flying a standard patrol, nothing remarkable, out over the middle of the strait. The pilot was seasoned, ex-military, straightforward sort, the kind of man who measured his words and trusted only the instruments in front of him. Midway through his route, he reported an object in the sky, metallic oblong, no identifiable wings or rotors. At first he assumed it was a weather balloon, then it moved, sharply, impossibly, veering upward in a vertical line, then flattening out into a dead hover. No sound, no vapor trail, nothing that played by the rules of known flight. The pilot radioed it in. Then, silence. A flat gap in communication, just long enough for the world to wonder. Then he was back, voice tense, clipped, like someone holding their breath while trying to act normal. He said, "Object gone, continuing route, landed as planned." Didn't file an official report, but he left the service 2 weeks later. No explanation. The co-pilot, years later drunk and forgotten at a coastal pub, told a stranger it wasn't gone. It just folded like a piece of paper slipping into itself. Then he cried into his beer and refused to speak of it again. That's the kind of thing the strait does. It shows you just enough to unmake something inside you, and then it closes back up, smooth as glass. We like to think we've mapped the world, that with enough satellites and sonar, we've tamed the unknown. But the strait reminds us otherwise. You can draw all the lines you want on a chart, but lines don't hold meaning when the place beneath them doesn't obey. There are entire stretches of the sea floor here that remain poorly charted. Not because we can't, but because every attempt to do so runs into problems. Equipment fails, drones lose signal, submersibles get caught in sudden undercurrents that weren't there the day before. Some divers swear by a rule of 3, go down alone and the strait might ignore you. Go down in a pair and you might get lucky, but bring a third and something watches. They've come back with camera footage corrupted, lights dimmed for no reason, audio that plays backwards or loops with voices no one remembers saying. They bring up sand that smells wrong, not like salt or rot, but like something burned long ago. Like earth that's been cooked under pressure, then drowned. You start to question the nature of water itself, how it holds memory, how it reflects not just light, but moments. How it might be a mirror, not of what is, but what once was, or what might be again. The Bass Strait becomes, in that light, more than a sea lane. It becomes an archive, a place that holds things too strange, too broken, too other for the world above. And every now and then, it lets something slip. There are whispers, from Tasmans who fish the deeper edges, of hearing voices across the water, not shouting, not cries for help, just voices, familiar ones, lost ones. A grandfather's song, a sister's laugh, a child's whisper from years ago. But when they turn their heads, nothing, only waves. One man, a long-time deckhand from Stanley, once swore he heard his father call his name from beneath the hull during a still night. His father had died 30 years earlier, in a shipwreck off Cape Otway. He never fished the Strait again. These aren't stories you find in travel brochures, but they're told, quietly, respectfully. Because the one thing everyone agrees on, even if they don't believe in mysteries, is that the Strait hears, and it remembers. What makes a place haunted? Is it the number of lives lost, or the way the land or sea holds on to them? Is it the stories left behind, or the silence that follows? The Bass Strait doesn't haunt the way an old house might. There are no rattling chains, no shadowy figures at the foot of your bed. What it offers instead is something colder, something more permanent. A feeling that something isn't right and might never have been. It lingers in the air. You step onto a ferry or a charter boat bound south and feel it in your chest before the engine even turns over. The tension of old ground, the memory of submersion. And in the Strait, memory is not a human thing. It's part of the water. Fishermen talk of days when their lines come back twisted, not just tangled but knotted in ways that seem impossible. Loops that shouldn't hold. Patterns that defy explanation. One crew swore a net came up with a hole shaped like a human hand, stretched wide, no fray, no tear, just absence in that shape. They left the sea for good the following month. You start hearing the same phrase repeated by different mouths. It's not just the sea, it's what's under it, or behind it. They never say more. Maybe they don't know how to. Maybe there aren't words in English, or any tongue, that can capture what it is they've brushed up against. But if the sea holds memory, then so does the sky above it. And that sky has seen things too. There's a forgotten report from 1983, lost in the shuffle of Cold War tensions and local indifference. A commercial pilot on a Brisbane to Hobart route reported seeing a light below him, underwater. At first, he thought it was a lighthouse beam caught in cloud reflection. But it moved, fast, faster than anything natural, and it followed them, not above, but below. Matching speed for nearly 10 minutes. Then it shot upward, breached the surface without a splash, and blinked out into the stars. No passengers saw it, or at least none reported it. But the pilot filed the incident, quietly, internally. One copy and a note. I don't want answers, I just want to forget. But forgetting doesn't come easy. Not here. There's a theory, one of the quieter ones, that the Strait isn't an anomaly of nature, but of time. That it's a scar from something that happened long before us, something the land remembers and we can't, or aren't meant to. When tectonic plates shifted and the sea poured in, maybe it wasn't just land that was drowned. Maybe it was something older, a passage, a door, and maybe now and then it opens just a crack. Those who vanish, maybe they don't die, maybe they just slip through, caught in a moment where reality stutters and lets something through that shouldn't be. That's why no wreckage turns up. That's why the last words always come laced with confusion, not panic, like they're seeing something that doesn't fit, like they're in the wrong chapter of the world's story. And those that do come back, the lucky, the shaken, they're never quite the same. They speak slowly, watch the horizon more than they used to. They stop sailing, stop flying, some stop speaking altogether. We've tried to wrap this place in explanations, rogue waves, inexperienced crews, optical illusions, atmospheric refraction, and sure, sometimes that's enough, but only sometimes, because deep down we all know that not every mystery has a solution. Some were never meant to be solved, only witnessed. The Bass Strait doesn't scream, it doesn't flash or roar, it whispers, it takes quietly, and the only evidence it leaves behind is the people who go on carrying the silence. There are places in this world that remind us how little we truly command. The desert does it with heat. The mountains do it with height. The Outback does it with distance. But the Bass Strait, it does it with disappearance. Not loud, not sudden, just gone. One breath, and then nothing. Like the tide pulling out beneath your feet while you're still standing still. You'd think, in the age of satellites and black boxes, we'd have it all mapped, that we'd solved the world. But the Strait reminds us that knowledge is not the same as control, and visibility is not the same as safety. Even the rescuers, the ones meant to be the answer to chaos, carry their own stories. A helicopter crew in 2001, responding to a distress beacon near the Furneaux group, encountered something strange. They arrived on site within an hour. Clear skies, coordinates solid. But there was no boat, no flare, no light, only the beacon signal, strong and steady, drifting just above the waves. They circled for 20 minutes, radioed in, waited. Nothing. The signal stopped. Cut clean. They lowered a diver into the water to investigate. He went down, and what he found wasn't wreckage. It was an empty life raft. No markings, no ID, just slowly spinning in place. A knife tucked into the floor, blade rusted black. The raft was recovered, tested, traced, but never matched to any known vessel registered in the last 2 decades. No missing persons linked to it, no reports. It just appeared. And in the diver's footage, there's something else. Just a flash near the edge of the frame, a shape, pale, tall, unmoving. It vanishes the moment the light touches it. No one's ever been able to identify it. Some call it a trick of the camera. Others don't speak of it at all. The rescuer left the service 6 months later. There's a reason sailors used to believe in sea gods, not just to explain the storms, but to give personality to the vastness, to imagine there was someone to bargain with, someone to respect. Because a force you can name is a force you can fear properly. But what do you do with something that doesn't even look back? That's the Strait's cruelty. It doesn't hate you. It simply doesn't notice. And so we fill the gap with stories, myths, echoes. We try to trace patterns where there may be none, because the alternative, that the world is full of holes and we could fall through one at any moment, is harder to bear. There's a woman I met once, years ago, at a ferry terminal in Devonport. She ran a boarding house nearby, knew every captain by name, weathered as driftwood and sharper than the wind. We got to talking about disappearances, the usual, the curious, the ones that stick with you. And she said flat out, it's not just that people vanish, it's that they're taken when they relax, when they think they've got it sorted. The Strait doesn't like certainty. I asked her what she meant. She just smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just tired. It wants humility. If you don't bring it, it'll make it for you. She'd lost her brother to the sea 35 years prior, never got him back. Not even a scrap of clothing. Just a notebook he left on shore, in the glove box of his ute. 1 page marked, circled 3 times. It read, "Some places aren't meant to be crossed, they're meant to be listened to." That stayed with me. It still does. Because when we talk about the Bass Strait, we're not just talking about tides and tempests, we're talking about something quieter, a listening place, a watching place, a place that holds space for the vanished. It's the absence that hurts more than any storm ever could, the void left behind when something or someone simply stops. No wreckage to bury, No grave to stand beside, just a question hanging in the air, year after year, unblinking. The Bass Strait deals in this kind of pain. Not in thunder or spectacle, but in the steady erosion of hope. You hear it in the voices of those left behind, parents, lovers, mates from the crew. They speak in the present tense because the past is too final. He flies well, they say. She knew the water, and they wait. Sometimes they even look to the horizon, not because they believe, not really, but because they need to. That's the quiet horror of the Strait. It doesn't end things, it suspends them. The last official survey done on disappearances in the region left gaps, whole entries marked unresolved, presumed drowned, cause unknown. Some files are still active technically, no evidence to close them, just enough doubt to leave the door ajar. One of the more recent cases from 2019 involved a small cargo flight, a twin-prop Piper Navajo, running goods from Tasmania to Victoria. Experienced pilot, routine manifest. It left Launceston in the early hours under clear skies. Mid-flight it deviated from its path, not sharply, not enough to trigger alarm, just a slow drift east. The pilot radioed in once, asking for confirmation on bearings. No distress, no confusion in his tone, just a request. Then the aircraft vanished from radar. No crash alert, no emergency beacon, just a fading blip that never reappeared. They say the black box signal was detected, faint, submerged, 3 days later, off Cape Barren Island. By the time divers reached the coordinates, there was nothing. Not even silt disturbed. The signal never returned. But here's where it turns. 1 week after the disappearance, a local bushwalker found something inland, 20 kilometers from any coast. A headset tangled in brush, worn, mud-streaked, identical to the model used by the missing pilot, but dry, as if it had never touched the sea. Forensics couldn't confirm it was his, but they couldn't rule it out either. The pilot's sister still wears his watch, still charges his phone every night, still waits. There's a toll the Strait takes that isn't written down. You see it in the towns that line the southern coast, Devonport, Apollo Bay, Port Welshpool. Places where people don't laugh about the water, not really. Where the tide has taken enough that no one jokes about it. You feel it in the architecture too. The lighthouses that still burn through the night, long after most others have gone automated. Because here, even with all the tech and the charts and the predictive software, there's still that lingering fear. What if someone's out there, right now, trying to come home? You light the way, just in case. Maybe that's the only real answer. We're not meant to solve the Bass Strait. We're meant to remember, to listen, to leave room for the echo. And to admit that maybe, just maybe, there are parts of the world that don't belong to us, and never will. In the end, all we have are stories. Stories that pass from deckhands to dockhands, from lighthouse keepers to grandkids, from one midnight voice to another. And if you listen hard, with the wind at your back and the sea breathing slow beneath you, you might just hear them too. And now we drift, slowly, back to shore. The sea remains, dark and endless behind us, its breath steady against the hull of the world. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of light and law, the Bass Strait continues its quiet work, holding, remembering, waiting. Maybe you feel it now, that hum beneath the silence. Not a sound, but something older. Something not made of words or waves, but of space itself. That's what this place does. It presses inward, makes you small in the best way, reminds you that not all questions were meant to be answered, and not all answers were meant to be heard. There's comfort in mystery for those brave enough to sit with it, to resist the urge to explain every strange ripple or distant light. Some things were born to remain just out of reach, like stars reflected in black water, beautiful, untouchable, and not meant for us. You see it in the way the shoreline curves back toward memory, how even the most experienced sailors pause before crossing the strait, how pilots check their instruments twice, even if they've flown the route 100 times. Respect, they call it. But deep down, it's reverence, the quiet kind, the kind passed between people who've seen just enough to believe in what they don't understand. And those stories, the ones shared in pubs, on wharves, by firelight and over radios crackling in the night, they're not just tales, they're survival. They're how we leave breadcrumbs across a map that doesn't want to be read. A way to whisper to those still listening, still sailing, still hoping, you're not alone. Because every vanished ship, every missing plane, every voice lost in static, they leave something behind. Not just grief, not just names on brass plaques, but presence, memory, a shape in the dark we can't quite trace, but feel every time the wind shifts cold across our necks. And maybe that's the real confession, that we too are part of the Strait's story, that each of us, by asking, by listening, by wondering, becomes one more ripple in its surface, one more echo it carries. So now, as you lie in the stillness of your room, with the world quiet around you and the sea still churning just beyond thought, let your breath fall into rhythm with the tide. Let the mystery wash over you, not as fear, but as belonging. The Bass Strait will be there in the morning, it always is, watching, remembering, waiting, but for now it releases you, lets you float back gentle and slow to the safety of your body, your bed, your breath. Close your eyes, let go, sleep now. And if you dream of waves, of stars low in the sky, of voices not quite your own, don't be afraid. The Strait is just saying goodnight.